Have you ever said something you totally didn't mean to say? Or, forgotten the name that you know perfectly well? Well, today, we're going to dive into one of Sigmund Freud's most fascinating and, frankly, unsettling ideas that are little everyday mistakes. They're not accidents at all. They're actually secret messages from our unconscious mind. So let's just start with that one big provocative thought. What if that name you just blanked on, or that word you just stumbled over? What if it wasn't some random brain fart? What if it was a deliberate message sent from a part of your mind that you don't even know exists? This is actually how Freud himself would kick off his lectures. Talk about a warm welcome, right? He was basically warning his audience that his ideas were about to challenge everything, and I mean everything they thought they knew about how their own minds worked. So let's take him up on that challenge and see what all the fuss was about. Okay, so first things first, we need to get our heads around Freud's whole method, which was this strange, new kind of science called psychoanalysis. And for his audience of medical students, it was unlike anything they had ever encountered. Think about it. In regular medicine, evidence is something you can see, you can touch. It's a cell under a microscope, right? It's a chemical reaction in a test tube. But in psychoanalysis, Freud explained, the only evidence is, and I quote, an interchange of words. You can't see the proof. You just have to be told about it. The whole thing is based on hearsay. This is the wild new territory we're stepping into. So instead of starting with these huge, complicated theories about the mind, Freud does something kind of brilliant. He starts our journey like a detective story by focusing on the smallest, most insignificant little clues, the kinds of things that everyone else just completely overlooks. And here it is. This is our central clue, the parapraxes. Now, you probably know it by its much more famous name, the Freudian slip. It's basically a faulty action, a tiny error that seems totally meaningless, but for Freud, it was packed with significance. And look, this is stuff we all do every single day. We say one word when we totally mean another. We forget a name that's right on the tip of our tongue, or we can't find our keys for the 10th time. We just brush these moments off, right? They're trivial. But Freud is asking us to just pause and look a little closer. He really doubled down on this whole detective idea. He said, you don't expect a criminal to just leave a signed photograph at the scene of the crime. No way. You have to hunt for the small, obscure traces they left behind. And for Freud, these little slips were exactly that. They were the tracks that could lead us to something much, much bigger. All right, so are these things really just simple errors? Let's be fair and investigate the common sense view first. The obvious explanation. This is the theory that, honestly, most of us would probably come up with ourselves. It goes like this. You're tired, you're distracted, maybe a little stressed, so your attention gets divided. And as a result, the super finely tuned machine that is your brain just makes a tiny glitch. It's a simple biological explanation. Seems logical. Case closed, right? Well, not so fast. Because Freud argues that if we actually look closer at the evidence, this simple attention theory, it starts to fall apart pretty quickly. It just doesn't cover all the facts. Let's look at the problems here. First of all, these slips happen all the time when we're perfectly calm and focused. In fact, sometimes they happen when we're trying extra hard to get something right. And here's the real kicker. How does being tired or distracted make you say the exact opposite of what you wanted to say? The attention theory just has no good answer for that one. So, this brings us to Freud's absolutely radical alternative. What if these mistakes aren't failures at all? What if they are actually successful actions with a hidden meaning all their own? Okay, check out this amazing example from Freud. The speaker, a president of parliament, was apparently dreading this really difficult session. His so-called mistake isn't random at all. It perfectly expresses what he really wants, to just have the whole thing be over with. The slip itself has a clear meaning. Or, how about this one? This is fantastic. This lady meant to say what he wants, but her slip of the tongue revealed her own very clear personal philosophy, that in her house, everybody eats and drinks what she wants. The mistake wasn't a mistake. It was the truth spilling out. And here it is, the crucial point. Freud argues that a slip isn't just some meaningless brain glitch. He calls it a completely valid psychical act, basically a statement with its own meaning and its own purpose that just happened to push the statement you intended to make out of the way. Okay, so if these slips are meaningful, where does that meaning come from? For Freud, this tiny little clue, the parapraxes, blows the door wide open to two of the most controversial and, honestly, world-changing ideas in the history of psychology.
His whole theory rests on two big claims. And in his own words, these two assertions were an insult to the entire world because they just defended our deepest held beliefs about ourselves.
First, the idea that not all of your mind is actually conscious. Before Freud, pretty much everyone thought the mind and consciousness were the same thing. But he argued that consciousness is just the tip of the iceberg. The vast, vast majority of our mental life, our thoughts, our desires, our real motives, it's all happening in the unconscious, completely hidden from us. And then there's assertion number two, the one that really got people worked up. Freud said that this unconscious world is filled with repressed, instinctual impulses, a lot of them sexual, and that these impulses play a massive role in our lives, not just in causing mental illness, but also in driving our greatest achievements like art and culture. And it's these powerful, hidden forces that burst through in our little slips of the tongue. So to wrap up his argument, Freud pulls out one last, really compelling line of evidence. He points out that while scientists had totally ignored these slips, great writers, poets, playwrights, they've understood and used this idea for centuries. So here, this character, Octavio, is talking about the young hero, Max. He means to say to him, meaning the Duke, but he slips and says to her, betraying the fact that he knows the real reason for Max's actions isn't duty, it's his secret love for the Duke's daughter. The slip reveals the hidden truth of the plot. And this example from Shakespeare is just beautiful. Portia is forbidden by an oath to reveal her love for Bassiano. But in this highly emotional moment, she slips. She means to say, the other half is mine, but the truth of her heart just breaks through. The truth that she is already completely his. The poet uses the slip to let us, and the characters, know what's really going on. And so, we end up turning Freud's whole investigation right back on ourselves. Now, whether you buy his theories completely or not, he gives us a really fascinating new lens to look at our own behavior. The next time you make a slip of the tongue, maybe you'll just pause for a second and wonder, was that really just an accident? Or was my unconscious trying to tell me something?